One of the closest Moses's moments, I would say, that I had was when he called me, a girl, to start a trucker's ministry at the Baptist church Bruce and I attended. Carol Ann at that time had headed up a singles ministry there, and I taught the class. That was how I eventually met Bruce. Yahweh would end up using the singles class as the truckers ministry foundational support. Even they at first weren't sure how all of this was going to come together, but we had already done several ministry outreach activities, so they were willing to see how it would go. So during a church business meeting, several men continued to talk about some kind of ministry for the truckers that parked along the road between the church and the P&G plant while they were waiting for their load. And this topic kept on coming up periodically, but nothing was being done about it. No one was moving to the next step. As I was leaving that particular meeting, a lady shared with me that the truckers didn't even have a restroom. What? And that was the statement that Yahweh used to actually quicken my spirit within me to do something for the truckers. So these are some of the initial photos, and you can see how all of this was grown up. And by the end of it, all of these pine saplings and all of this was pushed way back beyond these telephone poles, and all this trash was picked up. I mean, this was their environment. And this was the starting point right here, a trucker's outdoor restroom. And we got outside and we started picking up the trash, and it was massive. The road that ran between the church and the P&G plant was an overgrown mess. It sat between the well-groomed church grounds and the manicured P&G plant grounds. It was along that road where the truckers would wait for sometimes endless hours and sometimes days, especially due to delays or weather. Now, Moses had a shepherd's rod when Yahweh appeared to him in the burning bush. And the rod Yahweh gave me was a shovel. The next day, I got up and threw a shovel and a hoe into the back of Bruce's truck. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "The truckers do not have a restroom, and I'm going to clear off a spot of ground and order a porta-john." And off I went. I'm sure I looked strange out there digging in that hard gravel dirt, but I got it level enough, and within a matter of days had the porta-john in place. The guy gave me a discount after he heard what it was for. But the question was, how would the truckers know it was there and it was for them? So the answer to that dilemma was signs and more signs. So just to the right of this was the church parking lot that you cannot view. And this was the side road that would lead out to the road where the truckers were parked right here. And you could see all the overgrown trees, and it was a lot to take down. And you can see the piles and piles and piles of trash. And that was only the first pickup. There would be many more. The next Sunday came, and I had already been collecting items for care packages. I decided it would be best to set up a folding table on the P&G side under some trees. Bruce was very supportive and said, "Let's do it." We had coffee in large thermos containers, fold out table with black and white checkered table covering, a bag of biscuits with care packages and salvation pamphlets. It was a success. We had 5 to 7 truckers come to the table and had a wonderful time of fellowship. They were so appreciative of hearing how Yah was leading people to help the truckers. The next Sunday would be different because Bruce had gone back to work in Africa and I was by myself because Carol Ann and the class were in Sunday school. I sat on the tailgate of our truck parked on the side entrance of the church that I showed you earlier that connected to that road. It was a tailgate set up with biscuits and coffee, of course. And of course, I had to put up signs to let them know I was even there because you could barely see me. So I only had a couple of truckers that day, but I had a lot of interesting looks as the church members arrived. You see, I never got official church permission. I just did what Yahweh told me to do. Coming to saving faith at age 32 left me pretty much clueless to how the church functioned. And that was probably a good thing. So you see that by this time, the porta-john was actually dressed up with plants around it and a brick border around it. You see right here that the land was very much cleared. We were making progress. You see the railroad tracks here that really became a stumbling block. People were afraid to clean up along the railroad tracks because it wasn't our property. But other people in the church started coming and helping out as they saw the progress. They wanted to be part of that. At first, the trucker ministry only functioned on Sundays from 7 a.m. to noon. We eventually got 2 wooden picnic tables and set up on a corner of the church parking lot. And that was much better. And then some of the men of the church would stop by and talk to me and Bruce. Yahweh would use one of those men and his wife in a very instrumental way. They owned a small business and also knew how churches worked inside and out. They were a very sweet, compassionate, and loving couple. And thank you, Yahweh, for sending them. With their involvement, the truckers ministry attracted more members with a true heart to serve Yahweh and help the truckers, some of which had been truckers themselves. You see, truckers are the life-giving circulatory system for our nation and many other nations as well. We don't realize how important our truckers are. It is hard work and many times a thankless job, and that should not be. We should always thank the truckers for what they do for us. Next on the agenda would be picking up the trash along the road and clearing the overgrowth of pine saplings and weeds. Our group picked up trash and only made a small dent. Even with all those bags of trash lined along the road, that was only a small dent. That road was a mess. It was a dump site in essence. And thankfully, we got help from prisoners and they worked on that one road for 2 additional work days to clear the rest of the trash, clear out old tires, and well, you name it, it was there. May Yahweh bless those prisoners that helped us. You see, we eventually built a small cabin, but that came a year later. We had several stumbling blocks, like I mentioned, to maneuver first. And one of the stumbling blocks was the fact that there was a railroad track that wasn't used anymore, except on the far end to park a train car or 2. But people would say, you can't clear that. That's not your property. Oh, well, they shouldn't get too mad at us for cleaning the mess up. So we went forward, we went on. I did try to contact the railroad, but never made the proper contact. And I figured cleaning up the mess couldn't hurt. The overgrowth was so severe that from the road, you could barely see the church, much less the parking lot. It had to go. It simply did. It had to go, and it did. Some more men stepped up to the plate. Some had heavy equipment. Some had chainsaws, and I made calls to the city for dump trucks. The church was also having some parking lot repairs and heavy equipment was on site. I went over and spoke to the foreman, told him what I needed, and he said he would get with me after work that day. It was truly a divine appointment. Bruce had already told me we would need a skid steer, which I didn't even know what he was talking about, but he told me that's what I needed to clear the pine saplings. And yep, that is what the guy said we needed. And he had one and he did it. He didn't ask me for money. And I'm not sure to this day if he charged the church. I never knew, but Yahweh got it done. Maybe he was an angel unaware. Not only that, I shared with him we wanted to plant big crepe myrtle trees, and would he mind digging up the bigger holes with his backhoe? He said, sure. So, woohoo, we were in business, and it wasn't an easy journey. We had several setbacks, but it was definitely worth it. It always is when you hear Yahweh's voice calling you to do a special task that only you can do. There were many frustrations along the way and a sadness in my heart when it was difficult to scrape up enough support, but Yahweh provided just enough. So we did eventually get 2 restrooms in there, and the restrooms had showers. We eventually got we've got a washer and dryer placed up against this wall eventually as well. And we kept the porta-john outside for when the trucker ministry wasn't open. And this was part of the TV room that you see here. Eventually we get 2 computer stations back here. The goal was to transform a road that was a dumping ground into a recreational picnic area and rest stop for the truckers. After clearing, we outlined where the landscape beds would be placed. And you can see that here after we got all the pine saplings out. I had kept all the plants at our house waiting for enough people to help plant. That day did eventually come, and we had a small window of opportunity to plant before rain and cold weather would be coming. One young man looked at all the plants and he said, well, if we don't get it all done today, we can do it another day. I shockingly said to him, no, this is all getting done today. And that must have really scared him, because after a couple of hours, he was out of there. You can see by the number of trucks, the need the truckers had, and what a ministry opportunity it was at the very doorway of a church. I know I wasn't the first person Yahweh called to start the ministry, but I do know I was the first person that said yes. So all of these pine saplings you see over here were actually this area here. All of that was cleared, and then we put in the landscaped area, and you see all the trucks lined up on this side, and they were lined up on this side as well. And so we continued to clear. So we dug and planted. We dug and planted. We brought our tractor to lift the big trees. And yes, we got them all planted that day. And yes, heavy rains, or should I say the latter rains, came, and Yahweh watered everything. Hallelujah. There were 2 overflow parking areas made by the truckers beneath the trees on P&G grounds at each end of the street. This was one of them, and this one was closer to the Highway 165. And then at the other end was another one. The landmarks of this one street were very interesting. And at the onset, when I was wrestling with, should I do this? Is this what Yahweh was asking me to do? Along with the naysayers, I saw affirmation from Yahweh about moving forward. And the scripture he led me to described this very road. It's in Isaiah chapter 7, verse 3. And Yahweh said to Isaiah, go out now to meet Ahaz, you and Shear Yashub, your son, at the end of the channel of the upper pool on the highway of the fuller's field. Well, what did that mean? What's a fuller's field? So I looked it up, and it's the launderer's field. And in other translations, it says on the highway of the launderer's field. You see, at one end of this road was a water tank. There was a water tank, like an upper pool. And this P&G plant manufactured laundry detergent. And it connected to Highway 165. So that was Yahweh's affirmation that we were all doing what Yahweh wanted us to do. We made tons of care packages, and this is a view from the road of the finished truckers ministry. The cabin, as I shared, was equipped with a full kitchen, coffee maker, dining tables, 2 restrooms and showers, a washer and a dryer, 2 computer stations, and a TV lounge. Yahweh sent volunteers, and the truckers' rest stop was opened mostly every day from 8 to 5. You see a picture of the grounds that were cleared and landscaped along here. I was unable to get any picture so quickly to show you guys of the other. There was 2 more picnic tables like this along the road. It truly looked like a recreational rest stop for them to enjoy. And then, of course, here are the truckers. They were so appreciative. One trucker baked us the best pineapple upside down cake. They were so happy. Some would even go in for church services. Sometimes we had truckers' rigs fall into a ditch, and we would give them support as they waited to get it out. Other times we would take food and coffee in our vehicle and go to the drop point and serve the truckers as they pulled in and tell them about the truckers' rest stop. Our class would have cookouts there and fellowship with the truckers. The single Sunday school class was very helpful in bringing homemade dishes. The truckers were blessed, and those that participated were blessed. Their lives became full, and they got the opportunity to hear the truckers' testimonies firsthand. Thousands of truckers have been touched by this ministry to this very day. The bottom line is this: when his people are moved by Yahweh and not by the opinions of man, there is a unity and a sweet spirit that follows. Many of the elders in the church were also instrumental in seeing the truckers' ministry through. It was eventually recognized by the church, but it was never fully embraced by them, nor much of the leadership. On the other hand, it was fully embraced by several of his people within the church, and it was embraced by Yahweh. I do believe he was well pleased. We even had someone donate a fire pit to cook steaks on. Like Moses, there is an inner struggle when you are called to a specific ministry, but know that it may not be easy, but Yahweh will always provide.